Here's Jordan Peterson to explain what he thinks churches should be doing.
Hi all. It is, of course, completely presumptuous of me to dare to write and broadcast a video entitled Message to the Christian Churches, but I'm going to do it anyway because I have something to say and because that something needs to be said. I've been speaking to and watching and listening to audiences all over the Western world for the past 4 years.
What do you mean by the Western world specifically? Jordan and many of his buddies keep talking about the West as though it's a specific thing, but I've never heard them specify exactly what that means.
Now in the West, because of the weight of historical guilt that is upon us, a variant of the sense of original sin in a very real sense, and because of a very real attempt by those possessed by what might be described as unhelpful ideas to weaponize that guilt, our young people face a demoralization that is perhaps unparalleled.
Who are our young people, exactly? I'm not that young anymore, but I don't recall ever feeling any demoralization, even when I was young. What Jordan described makes me feel a weight of responsibility, but that's not demoralization at all. It's the opposite.
This is particularly true of young men, although anything that devastates young men will eventually do the same to young women.
What precisely is devastating young men? Who exactly has been devastated? I haven't been devastated. How have I managed to escape this devastation?
And that, in this era of antinatalism and equally reprehensible nihilism, is precisely the point.
I'd like to hear Peterson unpack the anti-natalism part. I have a suspicion that Peterson, at least partially, attributes this to the fact that people put greater thought into when and how they reproduce, or the fact that some people are conscientious enough about their reproductive choices to forego parenthood precisely because they don't think they would be able to provide a child with a good life to be the same thing as anti-natalism. I don't believe it is.
When they are children, boys are hectored for their toy preferences.
Yes, I remember being hectored for liking dollhouses and Star Trek action figures. I have my doubts that Jordan would have a problem with hectoring boys about that.
When in grade school, boys are admonished, shamed, and controlled in a very similar manner by those who think that play is unnecessary, particularly if it's competitive, and who value a docile, harmless obedience above all.
We'll later see that Jordan Peterson is not a consistent critic of teaching docile, harmless obedience.
Following all that, because that's not enough even when pursued assiduously for total demoralization, is the inculcation of an extremely damaging ideology, which essentially consists of 3 accusations. Number 1, human culture, particularly in the West, is best construed as an oppressive patriarchy, motivated by the desire, willingness, and ability to use power, defined as the compulsion of others against their will, to attain what are purely selfish and self-serving ends.
If this ideology had a problem with that, then wouldn't they want to discourage docile, harmless obedience? Wouldn't they instead encourage vituperative obstreperousness in order to undermine the patriarchy and fight against it?
This is true at every level of analysis. Marriage is akin to slavery, friendship to exploitation, political disagreement to war, and business arrangements to deception and theft.
Who, besides some randos whose quotes you could probably mine from Twitter, believes these things? Peterson seems to take the most extreme positions expressed by people, many of whom are likely trolls, and thinks that they are representative of an ideology that has significant influence.
Accusation number 2. Human activity, particularly that undertaken in the West, is fundamentally a planet-despoiling enterprise.
Who says it's fundamentally a planet-despoiling enterprise? The planet didn't start being significantly despoiled by human activity until about 200 years ago or so. The idea that it's fundamentally planet-despoiling is something that an anarcho-primitivist would say, and that ideology is one of the least influential of all current political ideologies. Folks who take the environment seriously are very rarely anarcho-primitivists. They don't want to eliminate human activity as such. That would be absurd. because the whole reason most environmentalists want to preserve the environment is to, in turn, allow the continuation of human activity, which is dependent upon the environment.
The human race is a threat to the ecological utopia that existed before us and that could hypothetically exist in our absence.
Who is saying this? This is the epitome of making up a guy to be mad at. Nobody who believes that there was a utopia before humans existed and that the planet would return to said utopia after we are extinct has any power or influence, cultural or political, over anything.
We might well be construed even as a cancer that threatens the very viability of the complex systems that make up the ecosystem of the Earth that shelters and supports us. We are facing a Malthusian catastrophe of overpopulation and biosphere degradation.
If you listen to folks of the left who care about the environment, which I strongly suspect is whom Peterson has in mind, you will discover that many of them consider that idea to be nonsense. There are some leftists who scaremonger about overpopulation, but there are also many who see Malthusianism as a dangerous and implicitly eugenicist idea, and that the problem is not the amount of resources relative to the population, but rather the unconscionable system by which those resources are distributed.
And we have to place extreme limits on our wants, even our needs, so that survival itself, even in a much reduced form, can be guaranteed.
Are the folks who say this the same folks as the ones who think Earth was a utopia before humans existed and would be a utopia again after human extinction? If so, it seems kind of weird that they would want to guarantee human survival.
Accusation number 3. The prime contributor both to the tyranny that makes up the oppressive patriarchy and structures all of our social interactions, past and present, and the unforgivable despoiling of our beloved Mother Earth is damnable male ambition, competitive and dominating, power-mad, selfish, exploitative, raping and pillaging.
Again, it would be a lot easier to get a firm grasp of what you're talking about if you actually quoted the folks who said this in their exact words. I might then have a better sense of exactly what they mean and why they make such an accusation.
You might think that I'm overstating the case. Think again, sunshine.
Well, I don't know, because you're not telling me who says these things or where or how they say it, so I have no way of knowing whether you're overstating the case.
We in the West are facing an all-out assault at the deepest levels on what that old joker Jacques Derrida deemed the phallogocentric conceptual structure of civilization itself. To take that apart, that's a society centered on the encouraging, adventurous, masculine spirit, and that privileges that hated word of all things, the divine logos. And what should we worship and celebrate properly other than that? Deconstructionists.
Deconstructionists don't seem to me to be very fond of the idea of worshiping anything. If you are genuinely opposed to teaching people to be docile, harmless, and obedient, then you should also be wary of anyone claiming that something is worthy of worship.
The words of that mass murderer Karl Marx?
Deconstruction is part of postmodernism, and no matter how many times it has been explained to Jordan that postmodernists explicitly and fundamentally reject the ideas of Marx, he still insists that Marx is some kind of idol to them.
And it is precisely those young men who are deeply conscientious, capable of guilt and regret, who have come to believe in pain that every deep impulse that moves them out into the world for the adventure of their life, even that impulse drawing them to women, is nothing but the manifestation of a spirit that is essentially satanic in nature.
I don't remember Derrida or Marx saying anything like that.
Invite the young men back. Say, literally, to those young men, you are welcome here.
In what churches are young men not welcome?
We want to work with you to make things better, to produce life more abundant for you and for your wife and children and for your community and your country and the world. And we have our problems in the Christian church. We are moribund and sometimes, far too often, corrupt and sometimes deeply so. We are outdated, as are all institutions with their roots in the dead but still often wise past.
I'm very curious as to how Peterson would recommend that churches stop being outdated. It seems as though all the ways in which they look outdated to me are all the things that he likes most about them.
So join us. We'll help fix you up, and you can help fix us up. And together, we'll aim up. And here's a message to those young men skeptical about such things. What else do you have? You can abandon the churches in your cynicism and disbelief. You can say to yourself, narcissistically and solipsistically, the church does not express what I believe properly. Who cares what you believe?
Well, earlier, when you were complaining about the desire of some nebulous entities to render men docile, harmless, and obedient, you seem to care about what they believe. Now you seem to insist that they set their beliefs aside and obey.
Why is this about you? Do you even want it to be about you? What if it was about others? What if it was about your duty to the past?
Why would somebody have a duty to the past? We can't affect the past. The past isn't around anymore to be disappointed.
And to the broader community that surrounds you in the present.
Sounds like Jordan is prescribing some docile obedience to such a duty.
What if it was incumbent upon you and vital to your health and willingness even to live, to rescue your dead father from the belly of the beast, where he has always resided?
What does that mean? Why would I need to rescue my dead father? He's dead. What do I need to rescue him from?
And to restore him to life.
Oh, I see. We're still talking make-believe. Sometimes it's hard to tell with Jordan.
Once again, to the churches, Protestant, you're the worst at the moment. Catholic, Orthodox. Invite young men. Put up a billboard. Say, young men are welcome here.
If you pass a Catholic church with a huge banner saying young men are welcome here, I would advise against getting anywhere near it.
Tell those who have never been in a church exactly what to do, how to dress, when to show up, who to contact, and most importantly, what they can do. Ask more, not less, of those you are inviting. Ask more of them than anyone ever has.
Sounds like you're asking for an awful lot of that obedience that I thought you didn't like. To everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.